And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Jessica Rachel, spiritual medium, who's here to talk about spirit guides, past lives, and more. Jessica, thanks for joining us and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. And Jessica, how did you get into all this stuff in the first place?
Yeah, it's not a very conventional path, I would say. Prior to this and becoming a full-time spiritual medium, I was actually an elementary school teacher. I taught grade 4, little kids, and it's all I ever imagined that I ever wanted to do with my life. I couldn't picture wanting to do anything else, even from a young child. That's all I wanted to do was be a teacher. And then I got into the field and started to have these little sort of niggling feelings in the background of maybe this isn't the right career for me. There's something about this that just doesn't feel aligned. I was doing it in a lot of ways to, please the people around me, please my family. Up here in Canada, getting a teaching job is actually a really coveted position. It pays really well up here. It's good benefits. It's considered a really good job. And it was something that I feel like I slotted myself into potentially to please a lot of people, besides the fact that I enjoyed working with children. And as time went on, there were more and more sort of signs and symbols that maybe this wasn't right for me. And this is where I like to say, and it actually ties in really well to everything that I talk about, which is spirit guides. And your spirit guides are there to knock you back into alignment if you're not in alignment. And the more you don't listen, the more radical they have to be. And although it's very helpful to be intuitive and to be connected to them, even if you're not listening to them, they're going to create circumstances in your life that you have to get knocked back into alignment. And I like to say they start small, right? Little whispers, and they'll throw little pebbles at you. Then it gets louder. They'll throw rocks and then boulders. And then eventually the rug kind of gets ripped out from underneath you. And that's exactly what happened to me. And so here I was, even when I was in teachers college, I started to question, is this what I really want to be doing? I'm not sure. There's something about it that doesn't feel right. And my fiance, now husband at the time, was like, just do it. You've done all this schooling. Just do it, right? My family's telling me to do it. Then I got into the field and I still was questioning, this doesn't feel right. And then the next year I would have a difficult colleague that I had to share a classroom with. And the next year, a difficult principal who was breathing down my throat, right? And everybody's throat, and making it more and more uncomfortable. And I found myself more and more feeling like this can't be my life for the next 30 years. I don't know what I want to do, but it can't be this. But I still wasn't listening, and I still kept showing up because I couldn't imagine anything else. Until one winter, I got into a car accident. Essentially, I spun on some black ice. My car went spinning and slammed into a snowbank, and the wheels came off, and I got a mild concussion. It wasn't huge, but I got a concussion. It was enough that the doctor sort of said, you got to take a couple weeks off to recover. And so it was that time where I kind of took a deep breath and went, a break from work. This is wonderful. And I took a little bit of time off. And again, that feeling of, I shouldn't be this relieved to have to be away from work for a couple of weeks. But nevertheless, I decided I was going to go back to school when the winter break was over after Christmas. And right before the Christmas break, my husband and I went skiing with some friends. And I was wearing rental skis and I fell in a funny way, but my boots didn't detach from my skis. So I went one way, but my feet went the other, and I tore my knee. And so when it was time to go back to school, HR called me, how's your concussion? How are you healing? Actually, I'm on crutches now. And they went, you're a liability. Like, now you can't, you just had a concussion and now you're on crutches. Like, we can't have you walking around the schoolyard. You're just going to get hurt. So they actually put me on forced leave. They told me that I couldn't come back until there was no more snow on the ground. Well, this was January, so that was going to be until pretty much the end of April. So they gave me about 5 months off of school and to recover from my injuries, essentially, and take some time before they wanted me to come back. And so my husband looked at me and said, well, you said you didn't want to be a teacher. Now's the time to figure it out. And I thank him so much for pushing me that way. And it was in that time, these 5 months where I was kind of couch ridden, I was on these crutches, I couldn't really move. And I thought, well, even if I do go back to teaching, I can't go on the way I have been, and I have to figure out another way to cope. So I started taking meditation classes. There was a woman who I had met actually through teaching, and she hosted these women's meditation circles in her home. She invited me to come, and I thought, well, I have nothing better to do. I can't move. May as well learn how to meditate. And the more that I started, I never felt relaxed. I never meditated before. I didn't even know what it was. And it was the most relaxed. And I suddenly became addicted to going to these women's circles. And I started going every single week. And the more and more I went, the more open I was getting, the more relaxed I was getting. And these women were very spiritual, the ones who attended this circle. And I remember saying to the leader of the group, I just don't think I want to be a teacher anymore, but I just can't figure out what I want to do. And I was just looking to her for some guidance. And she said, well, why don't you just ask your spirit guides? My what? And I had no idea what she was talking about it. And so she tried to explain it to me, and she said, you don't just have to meditate here. There's an app. You can go online and get these hundreds of different meditations. Find one that teaches you how to connect with your spirit guides, and I promise you'll have your answer. And I went, okay. So I went on Insight Timer because it's free. And I looked for whatever I could find that taught you how to connect with your spirit guides. And it took me a good long time. It took me a few months of doing these same meditations over and over again. But eventually I did connect. I did connect to my spirit guides, and I did start to get some signs and some symbols that they would show me in the meditation, and then they would show up in my real life. And I continued to attend these meditation circles. And I met this one woman who was actually a medium, a psychic medium. She just didn't advertise it to people. I asked if she could work on my husband and I. And I remember she had my husband on the table and she was working on him. She starts calling in all of these beings. She calls in Archangel so-and-so and, Saint so-and-so. And I'm sitting on the floor in the room, just enjoying the soft music. And I suddenly see all the beings that she had called in. As she called them, I see them come into the room, and I see these lights and I see everything coming in. And I just sat there gobsmacked. My jaw hit the floor. So she finished working on my husband. I went up to her after and said, when you called in so-and-so, does he look like this? And she went, yeah. And I said, and this one, he's purple, right? Yeah. And I said, can you please mentor me? What is this? What am I experiencing? So she said she never mentored anyone before, but she agreed to work with me. And so I would go to her house every couple of weeks, and she taught me through meditation how to ground and, how to connect with things like spirit guides, how to connect with loved ones from the other side and what that looked like, and how to start channeling messages from those beautiful beings of light who support us. And I was so addicted from that point. I couldn't stop. I practiced on everyone I could. And when I finally was starting to get clear messages from my guides, the only reason I was doing it was because I wanted this one answer. If I'm not going to be a teacher, what am I supposed to do with my life? And they finally said, this is what you're supposed to do. You were supposed to connect to us, right? Spirit guides on the other side, and help people find their true path and purpose. Help them who are in the same spot as you get to that place of true alignment. And from then on, I took the summer to practice, and come September, I quit my job, and that's what I started doing. Yeah.
When you saw these spirit guides, did they look like orbs of light, or did you see full beings?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. When I saw my first spirit guide that was mine, she actually looked like a grandmother. And I knew it wasn't any grandmother of mine. I had seen pictures of my own ancestors, and I went, I don't recognize this face, right? Like, who is this little thing that looks like this little old grandmother? And when my mentor had called in those beings of light, they did take on characters. They almost remind me of like fairy tale creatures, I would say. They have wings. If they are an angel, they really look like an angel. Sometimes they kind of look fairy-like. So they do have a beautiful aura around them. So sometimes they can be perceived as orbs of light. But if you look closer and you start to see the details, they do tend to look like characters. I call them, I always say they look like fairy tale creatures because they're always so fun.
Do they look like transparent humans, kind of like ghosts?
I guess you could say so. I would say they're a little bit more like holographic in my mind. So I'm predominantly clairvoyant. And so my experience of them is a lot more detailed than maybe somebody who only hears them or, who isn't as tapped into the visual. For me, it's really a visual experience. And so there's a lot of details. Yes, I would say it's like a sparkly, glimmery light. The best way I could say is it kind of looks like a hologram. Yeah.
How do you define spirit guides?
Yeah. So I have an ever-changing definition of spirit guides because I don't claim to know all of the secrets of the universe and probably never will. But here's my take on it is that it's a piece of source energy, God, the universe, oneness, consciousness, whatever feel most connected to, let's call it God. But in our mind, that is such a weird thought to think I'm connecting and talking to God all day. Like that almost feels like too humbling, if you will, and a little bit scary, but it's the piece of source that's directly assigned to you. It comes down in a form and a figure so that it feels like I'm talking to something. It's a little more tangible for me to understand. So I feel like I'm not just talking to the air or talking to the big man in the sky, right? It's like this piece that's directly assigned to me. And so, a lot of people ask me, do I have one spirit guide or do I have many? And do they come through at different places? Well, if we think about source being sort of like this infinite thing, it's going to send down different messengers at different times and morph and change them as needed because the message is going to be different. And so whenever I work with a client, they ask me it feels like I'm seeing a different guide each time, but it's always source. It's just coming through with a different image because there's a different message that needs to come through.
What are some of the mistakes that people are doing that are stopping them from connecting with their guides?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first one, there's two major blocks in my opinion. One is fear. If you're worried about or so superstitious or fear of, if I unlock this, what am I getting myself into? What's on the other side of this? There's a lot of holding back. There's a lot of not allowing yourself to relax deep enough to get into that meditation, to be able to connect. And then the other part is trust. And I think a lot of people have a misconception that connecting to your intuition is this amazing, experience outside of yourself. I'm going to see this apparition in front of me, like I see this hand in front of me. And that's really not the experience. The experience is a lot more akin to experiencing things within your own imagination, within the context of channeling. So if you've called your guides in, whatever you experience within your own mind in that moment, the imagination that you experience, the sounds, the words in your mind, the pictures that play across in your mind, those are channeled messages. And we mistrust those. We assume it's ourselves. We assume that we thought that, right? But within the context of I called them in, whatever comes through in that moment is a channeled message. And we have to learn to trust that and get better at leaning into that.
So are the messages coming to you as downloads, or are you also clairaudient and you hear their voices?
It's a great question. And so I always say that everybody has one clair, if you will, that or sense that is stronger than the others. And for me, that's clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is the strongest one. But then I worked diligently to sort of improve the other ones, my clairaudience, my clairsentience. I improved all of them because and I worked and practiced with them. And simply by saying, spirit guides, can you please help reactivate and strengthen this one and this one and this one so that all of the senses are coming through? Because think about it, when you're having a conversation with a person, I mean, typically we're not just, reading facial expressions, right? Or looking at images. There's also words that are happening. There are feelings that are happening. There are so many senses that come at us when we're having a conversation. It's so much easier to pick up on all of the nuances when it's coming at us from all of our senses. And so, yes, for me, and originally, it was just an image playing across my mind. And I was so frustrated because it felt like I was playing charades. Like I would see an image and not know what it meant, or I would then have to go Google, like, what does it mean when a spiritual meaning of an owl? What is that? And then when I worked to sort of include clairaudience and clairsentience and all of the other ones, claircognizance, now I'll see the image, I'll hear the guide talking to me very clearly. And so it's a combination of all of those things. They'll send shivers down my spine. They give me lots and lots of clues so that the message is clearer and clearer each time.
Many people consider Earth as being a school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're connecting with our spirit guides and getting extra information, is that in a way cheating the experience?
Oh no, I would say quite the contrary. And this is the thing, is that your spirit guides are working with you whether you're paying attention to them or not, right? As I said with my own story, I wasn't paying attention, so they radically shoved me into the right, into the right. The thing is, when you are listening to your guides, then the road is a whole lot less rocky. Then they don't have to radically shove you to where you need to be. You just find yourself listening to those little next right steps and finding yourself along the way. Are you going to maybe get along your path and kind of learn those lessons a whole lot faster? 100%. But isn't that the point? The sooner we do it, the sooner we reach enlightenment. So if that's the point, then let's do that sooner.
Some people may be confused whether the information that's coming in is actual channeled data or is it their imagination? How do they trust that?
I agree. And that's probably the biggest roadblock that most of my students come across is how do I know that I channeled that and that I didn't just make it up? And there's a couple of things that you can do is that you have to think about your guides as these beings who want to build a relationship with you. And they want to be trusted. They want you to be able to understand them and feel them and be in this place where you know you're not making it up. And so when you build that relationship with them and you directly ask them, send me a sign so that I know I'm on the right path. And if you do this within the context of channeling within a meditation, let them show you a specific sign or request a specific sign. Say, show me a pink flower, right? And then you go into your real life. And when they send you a sign, it's not subtle. It will smack you between the eyes. It'll be like someone coming up to you and, with a big pink flower on their shirt and giving you a hug. Like you won't be able to miss it. And so when you start to see that, and probably when you were in that meditation asking for a pink flower or asking for a sign and you see a pink flower in your mind, you kind of went, I just made that up. But then in real life, you see that pink flower and someone's wearing it on a shirt and gives you a big hug. I mean, you can't deny it. And so the more you start to have conversations like that and experiences like that, you start to trust it just a little more. And then the other piece is that your guides are really there to give you guidance and give you advice. And so they're not going to steer you wrong. If they're giving you advice and then you go ahead and you don't question it, you just take action on it. And you see that it actually benefits you in the long run, you kind of go, oh, I mean, hey, it worked, so I may as well do it again and listen to what they have to say. So it is a little bit of a trial and error kind of a game you have to play to build up that trust muscle. But then the other piece is that, and this is something I tell my students all the time, it is so much easier to receive messages for somebody else than it is for ourselves because we can be so opaque to ourselves. We're too attached to our own outcomes. And so if you're uncertain and you're wanting to strengthen your intuition, go ahead and channel the guides of somebody else. Have them ask questions that you have absolutely no attachment to. Should my friend here go to the party tonight? Yes or no? And if I get the answer so clearly, I'm going to see I have no bias either way, whether they go to this party. So it's going to be a lot easier to build up trust that way.
Are spirit guides the same thing as guardian angels?
Yes and no. So when I connect with spirit guides, that's a very specific realm. I say that we actually have both. And so you can have spirit guides, they're very specific piece of source assigned to you to help make sure that you are on your path and purpose in this life, that you are fulfilling the reason that your soul decided to come to Earth School this time around. And you kind of went, I'm going to have these experiences. I'm going to help people in this way. I'm going to do those things. When we think about guardian angels, I think a little bit more along the lines. First of all, angels sit in a different realm. So angelic realm is a little bit higher up. We can still access them, and I love to access them often, but they're a little bit more from the place of, I'm watching over you, but I'm not going to intervene. If at any point you get into some sort of hiccup where you may accidentally end your life before you were meant to, that's what I'm going to step in. But otherwise, I'm not there to give you information. I'm not there to be pushy. I'm not there to kind of intervene in any way. Whereas your spirit guides, they're constantly intervening. They're talking to you all day long. They're pushing you in the right direction, whether you're listening or not. Your angels kind of stand there and they kind of just wait and make sure that you're okay. And if at all you ever need some sort of assistance so that you don't kind of, again, end the journey too soon, that's when they'll step in.
Some people see repetitive numbers on the clock, like 11:11 or 4:44, and some people find feathers or pennies or other things. Is all that information coming from the spirit guides or angels?
It's a good question. So, it's funny with the numbers, like 1111, people say, oh, those are angel numbers. And, 222 and all those number patterns, those are angelic numbers. And I would say, yes, probably they are. The thing about those things, finding, pennies and feathers and numbers, people always kind of go, what does that mean? And it means there's a general meaning for all of that, which is that your guides and angels are letting you know we are here with you in this moment. Okay. So yes, you can then go and look up, what does 1111 mean? What does 444 mean? And yes, I'm sure there are many blogs on the internet that kind of say there's a very specific meaning to that. And I do say, look into the context. What were you talking about or thinking about in the moment that you saw that particular number? Potentially there's a message in there for you. But usually it's the same two messages. We are with you in this moment, and it's a wink or a little nudge of, yes, you are on the right path. And so again, whether it's your angels or your spirit guides, it doesn't really matter. They're just giving you that nudge of reassurance. Hey, you're not alone. We're with you, and you're on the right path in this moment.
Have your spirit guides ever given you any information about what's coming in the near future and how to prepare for it?
So I will say spirit guides are omniscient, right? They're a piece of source, so they can provide you with that information. And, my clients always come to me asking about future things. And here's the thing, the future, we still live on the planet of free will, and the future still is subjective to the choices that you make. And so, especially when I'm channeling for somebody as a client, they'll ask me if, what's the outcome, of this next event in my life. And the way that guides will present it to you is they will say, if you make this choice, this is the foreseen outcome. But if you choose differently, the outcome is different. And so they can offer you the result of multiple choices, but they can't actually tell me the definite future, because that relies on you, because we have free will. I can't say for sure that a guide has ever come to me and said, like, this collective thing is going to happen. But that's partially because I've created some very strong boundaries with them. I know many mediums who enjoy that kind of information. For me, it feels a little too doomsday. And so I've created very strict boundaries with my guides that unless it's positive, uplifting, inspiring, and motivating, I don't need that information. And thank you.
How did you discover your ability to tap into past lives?
Yeah. So that actually happened very naturally through working with spirit guides. And so when clients come to me, it's usually because they're a little lost, typically in their career is usually where they end up, but they're sort of going, what's my purpose in life? What's my path and my purpose? And so when we call in their spirit guides and we ask them that very question, why am I here? The guides kind of say, well, actually, you have some unfinished business from your past life. Let me show you. And that unfinished business that they have from their past life is usually what's going to translate to your ultimate path, purpose, and mission in this life. And so the guide will come in and often show me, it looks like a movie in my mind. So they actually show me an image of what that person looked like in the previous life. And they'll start to give me the whole context. They show me when the life was, where the life was, what were the circumstances of that life, what are the most significant events of that life, and what is the unfinished business, what happened. And then after they give you all of that context, they'll kind of say, and this is why you need to be doing this, this, and this in this life. And then they kind of go even more specific and they say, here are the next right steps. Here's what you should be doing. Here's how you should be doing it. Like, do this, 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 and this. But they have to give you the context first for you to sort of understand, why am I even doing this?
Can you explain the mechanics of how a soul carries their past experiences from one life to another?
I don't know if I can explain the exact mechanics of it. I can definitely say there is evidence of it. And I would say, I do want to add this, that technically, and for a purpose, our souls do choose amnesia when we come down into every new life. If we were, a typical soul has been here hundreds of times, if not thousands of times. And if you remembered every single trauma that you have had in every single lifetime, I mean, we'd all be in the loony bin, right? Like, it's just too much for us to remember. However, there are some significant things, and typically the pieces that we do remember, subconsciously speaking, are the pieces that are here to propel us, or things that need to be worked on, solved, resolved in this lifetime. And so it's usually the most significant past life that we will remember that's weighing on our choices in this life. So I'll give an example. I had a client who she had a significant past life in it was London, England. And this lifetime she was a servant, and the servant, she was a servant to a big household. And in that lifetime, she got pregnant, out of wedlock, and got kicked out of the household. And in this lifetime, number one, there was something really interesting, which is that she had a very unexplained affinity to London, England, even though she was from here in Canada. And she went there and she kind of went, I don't get it. Like, I just understand. Like, I don't need a map. I know where to go. Like, this feels like home for some reason, right? Because she had lived there in a previous life. So she was always interested in London and, British culture and all of those things. So there's rememberings that way. And then, we also discovered that the master who had kicked her out was in this lifetime her mother. And in this lifetime, it was her mother's responsibility to reverse that karma, right? Instead of kicking her out, it was her job to take care of her, right? So there are a lot of things that go there. And then meanwhile, this woman, her whole lifetime was all about breaking that boundary of people pleasing, that lesson of people pleasing, right? Because she had lived as a servant her whole life. So this lifetime was all about, overcoming that and not, being so submissive all the time and stepping up, using her voice. And then that translates typically to helping others do the same. So it can really be so helpful to know, like, what were the circumstances from a past life? Because when we see that context, we kind of go, oh, okay, this is why I have to do what I have to do.
Well, that's the puzzle. And what I mean by that is, if we come here with amnesia, how are we supposed to know what are we supposed to be working on and what our purpose is?
Yeah. And we do get clues though. That's the thing, is we're not just left to figure it out all on our own. The clues come in what I like to call tests almost. You will see a soul will find themselves in a very similar circumstance to the one that they found themselves in the previous life. Obviously, it's, several hundred years, centuries later. And so the circumstances can't be exactly the same, but there are similarities. And so the soul is then tasked with finding themselves in a similar situation and having to overcome it in some way. And so for this woman, if we think about sort of being a servant, right? I mean, she's not a servant in this lifetime, but she kept finding herself in roles where she was serving other people. Unfortunately, this mother of hers was not kind, right? And so, there was a lot of overcoming and speaking up for herself in front of her mother and to her mother, right? And so the circumstance is similar, but not the same. And, even if she does overcome that, it comes again in the way of another test. Maybe it's a boss that's doing the same thing and walking all over her and having once again, to learn to speak up for herself, right? Getting potentially into a relationship where, again, feeling walked all over and needing to speak up for themselves. So I always say, pay attention to the patterns that keep showing up. Is there a circumstance you keep finding yourself in over and over again? And until you actually resolve it, it's going to keep showing up until your soul evolves.
What are the traits of a person who is an old soul?
So, I mean, I would like to say probably at this time of the universe, so to speak, most of us are pretty old souls, but you can sort of tell the difference between an older soul versus someone who's maybe slightly younger. There's an amazing author and medium. His name is Ainsley MacLeod, and he talks a lot about soul ages, right? If we talk, or soul levels, if you will, a soul being a level 1 versus a level 10 soul. And I do see a lot of those same patterns. What I would say is that if someone is a very old soul, let's talk about from his language, a level 10 soul, potentially this is one of their last lifetimes here, at least incarnated as a human. Potentially a typical soul's journey, we would say they incarnate here as a human over and over and over again till they achieve what we would call enlightenment. And then they go sort of, once that happens, then it's sort of their choice where they go next. Maybe the next one is spirit guide, where their job then is to help others kind of do the same ascension, right? Then maybe angelic realm. But other souls do skip around. So ultimately it is your soul's choice. But if we think about kind of getting to the end of a soul's experience, there's a couple of things that a soul will really be focused on. One, there's a really big focus. There's a really big urgency of there's so much I need to do. And I feel like the clock is running out. Right? There's this urgency that they can't explain. So that comes through really strongly. There's also this really strong urgency to create or build what you would call a legacy. There's sort of this feeling of I have this really strong mission and I really feel like I need to get it out. I need to get it out to the masses as much as possible. There's this feeling of I'm going and I need to leave behind information that's going to let other souls ascend as I have. Another thing you would see is older souls tend to, often they tend to be more spiritual, right? But you would sort of see, if we think about the purpose of an ascension, if you will, we're all trying to get to the same goal, which is coming into the understanding that I'm a piece of source, I'm a masterpiece, a piece of the master. And so the closer I get to that realization and the more exploration I do in that understanding and peel back the layers of what does it mean to really be a piece of source? What does that actually mean? And I keep diving deeper and deeper into that knowing and start to recognize the understanding of oneness and consciousness and that we are all one. The closer you are open to that understanding and the less you are in survival mode, the less you are focused on just, making your millions and putting food on the table and doing those kinds of things. It's when you start to realize that those things don't matter as much. That's when we would say, oh, this is the markings of a much older soul.
What are some of the everyday signs and synchronicities that a person may be encountering someone they knew from a past life?
Well, souls typically do tend to travel together quite a lot. So you often will see that, even in immediate families, those souls tend to know each other. Not always, but pretty often. And we just play different roles, right? So mother and daughter will often switch back and forth. And, brothers will find each other in different lifetimes and play role of then father, son. And, that kind of a thing. We can switch genders as well, right? So if it was your father, the next role, it can be your mother, right? So souls typically do travel together. I will say that a lot of people claim that when they feel when they've met somebody that maybe they've traveled with before, there's a comfort there. There's a level of, I don't know why I feel so comfortable around you. I just do. And it could be because you've lived lifetimes together, but it could also be that they come in and they trigger you. They come in and they just blow everything up, right? And that is probably a soul playing some form of karma, right, for you. Maybe in a previous life, you wronged them. So they're here to offer the same thing and give you the opportunity to make that up for them. And so, there are some souls who really come in to just, they come in for a moment, they trigger you, and then they're out of your life again. And so, we see that too. So it could come from a place of love and comfort. And sometimes it comes from like, they just came in, they dropped a bomb, everything exploded, and you heal it, you move on, you learn from it, right? And it's kind of like, oh, that probably was from a previous life. We probably had some karma we needed to fix there.
Who have you been in a previous life?
Oh, that's a great question. So I surprisingly have had, similar to the client I described, I've had a lot of previous lives lived in poverty, believe it or not. So either as a servant or living sort of below the typical means of the average. So I've seen a lot of lifetimes like that. Also seen a lot of lifetimes for myself where I've been a bit of a nomad. So I do see that sometimes, a little bit of like a gypsy soul. And many lifetimes I've seen where I've been sort of I wouldn't say many lifetimes. There was a couple significant ones where I would have been seen as like the pariah, kind of like the weird one on the outskirts, preaching some weird things. And people kind of going, what's with her, right? What is she saying? What's she talking about? And being kind of pushed to the perimeter of the community in some way. So definitely had some lifetimes like that. Yeah. But, there's many. So.
Well, what do you think your purpose is this time, as well as what are you supposed to learn?
Yeah, it's a really good question. This time, I feel like I came in with a very, very strong purpose. And this lifetime really has been a lot about being put in the circumstances where I've had to use my intuition to get myself out of some very sticky situations, and therefore advocating for others that intuition is something that is important to connect with and helping people realize, hey, this is everything you see in the world is not all as it seems. There are things on the other side there to support you. There's this loving source being that we need to be paying attention to and connecting with. Let me show you how. And so I think that purpose comes in very, very strong for me of like, let's connect to our intuition. Let's learn to trust it. Especially because in past lives, there have been many past lives where I have tried to preach those things in the past and been burned for it. Not literally. I mean, maybe, but not one that I remember. And so this lifetime is really about it's safe to share these teachings. This is a lifetime where we put that out to the greater good and to the bigger collective.
Well, what's the best way to access and trust your intuition?
So I do want to say, first of all, that your intuition is something you are born with. Everybody has one. It's like a muscle. It's not something you need to get to. It's something you need to remember. It's something you need to realize was already there. And the easiest thing to do is to start to pay attention to the times when your intuition has already played a role in your life. Because when you start to recognize those, then it gets a little bit stronger. So think about the time when you were having a conversation with somebody and you started to feel chills down your spine, right? That was a confirmation from your guides. Pay attention to this. This is a truth for you. When do I get more of those, right? When was there a time where I had a gut feeling to not go to that party tonight, but I ignored it, I overrode it because, all of the socialized social circumstances that told me otherwise, I ignored it, and then I regretted going. Maybe next time I listen to that gut feeling, right? And then those knowings, those intuitive downloads, if you will, get stronger as we start to listen to them when they come through. Everybody experiences those little whispers. So that's on the surface level. That's like the easiest thing that you could do, right? Is start to listen to the things you've already experienced and try to pay more attention to them and actually follow them. If you want to dive deeper and you kind of want to go, no. Like, I want to talk to my spirit guides. I want to have a conversation with them. I want to be connected. I always say that the best form to do that is through meditation, is through getting quiet. Now, you don't have to be good at meditating. Listen, I have ADHD. Meditation and sitting still, not my strong suit. However, it is important to get to a place where you get out of your head and into your body. You can do this as simply as taking 5 deep breaths and focusing on your breath to do that. And so if we take a few deep breaths, right, we start to focus on our body. We get out of our chattery thoughts. We move away from the to-do list of the day, and we start to focus inward and get to that place of quiet. A meditation can always help, and I recommend guided meditations, guided visualizations, anything that, again, gets you focused on something beyond your day-to-day. And then from there, you want to actually connect with your spirit guides. You actually have to build a relationship with them by speaking to them out loud. Hey, spirit guides, are you here with me? Spirit guides, can you please come and join me in this moment? It's enough to just say, spirit guides, are you here with me, to start that conversation. And so I always recommend doing that. And you do have to speak out loud. Once we get better at it, yes, there is something to be said about telepathic communication. But when we're first starting out and we're first learning to trust it, it's easier to just speak to them. And then you want to start asking them questions. You want to ask them to reactivate and strengthen your intuitive abilities, right? Please reactivate and strengthen my ability to see you, my ability to hear you, my ability to feel you. And then start asking them questions and see what you experience. Right? Ask them, do I, yes or no questions. Do I do this or do I do that? And see what comes forward for you. Does a yes happen? Does a no happen? You can also ask them for a physical sensation in your body so that you know they're here with you. This is something I call my intuitive kind of insurance policy. If you're ever doubting that you actually called your guides in and they're there with you, ask your guides to send you a physical sensation that they're there with you. Then ask them to turn up the volume, like picture a volume dial. Can I turn up the volume on that sensation? And that sensation might feel like tingling in your third eye or like someone's pushing on your third eye. For me, it feels like tingling or warmth in the palms of my hands. It almost feels like someone's pushing my hands back and forth like this. Some people tell me it feels like, warmth on their chest or someone's tickling their face. Whatever it is, you'll feel something. And you ask your guides to turn up the volume on that so you really notice it. And then anytime from then on that you call your guides in, you're going to look for that sensation. So if you ever doubt, I asked a question and the answer came through, did I make that up? Well, am I feeling the sensation? If I'm feeling the sensation, if my hands are still going like this, it was my guide, it wasn't me. So definitely work on that sort of intuitive insurance policy. And then it comes so much easier after that.
If we get back to past lives, what is an easy way for someone to start exploring their own?
Yeah. So there's this incredible book called Many Lives, Many Masters by, I think his name is Brian L. Weiss, which I highly recommend everybody read. It's a really, really good book. But the best thing about this book is that he was a hypnotherapist and psychologist and ended up accidentally discovering all of this woman's past lives. And that's the thing, is that your subconscious, I mean, your past lives live in your subconscious mind and you're just not aware of them. So it's as simple as getting into that state of being able to access your subconscious. Well, how do you do that? Through meditation. If you can get relaxed enough into a deep enough meditation, and you don't necessarily need someone outside of you to hypnotize you, although that can also be very effective. You can get into a deep meditation and then you can ask your subconscious brain. And again, I recommend speaking out loud. Please show me the most significant past life that my soul has experienced. And in that context, if you've gotten yourself to a deep enough state of relaxation, you will see it. You will explore it. I did an amazing episode on my podcast, Intuition Activation, an episode all about this. And I put the meditation in there that I created. You can listen to it for free. You can listen to that meditation and it will guide you right through experiencing your own past life. And it's as simple as listening to a guided meditation. It actually is not hard to access at all.
In preparing for today's discussion, I was checking out your YouTube channel, and there's a couple questions I want to ask from that.
Yeah.
First, how does a person know if their soul is from the angelic realm?
I love that question. Yeah. So your soul, so what we've talked about today is a typical soul's journey, right? When we think of a typical soul, we call them an earthly soul, if you will. And that's a soul who incarnates here on the planet Earth over and over again until they achieve enlightenment, if you will. But there are some souls who do something a little bit different, and we call them, they're actually something called a starseed, which is a whole other category. And then there are what we would call earth angels. Now, an earth angel is a soul who their most recent past life was not necessarily here on the planet. It wasn't here as a person. They actually are descending directly from the angelic realm. Now, there are two types of earth angels. There is a type of earth angel who has never existed as a person before. So they have only ever existed in the angelic realm. And then they're coming down, choosing to have a very specific purpose and mission in this world. And then they kind of go right back up. They're here for one and done mission, if you will. And then there are some souls who kind of have had all of their lifetimes. So they've sort of achieved enlightenment, if you will. They finished that incarnation cycle, if you will, and have since ascended. Maybe they went through spirit guide life school and then they went to angelic realm, or they just went right to angelic realm. Again, I don't claim to know all the secrets of the universe and what exactly happens post-death. But, from my understanding, a lot of the times it is your choice. And either way, they're coming down for a very specific purpose. They were sitting up in the angelic realm and went, I'm too far away. I need to do something here on earth. And the people down there, they're just not hearing me. I have to come down and I have to share some sort of message. I have to bring forward some sort of thing to help elevate humanity in some way. And so these souls, however, they come down. Number one, you can tell you come in with a very strong mission, a very strong purpose. So they do come in, and typically they don't tend to find that purpose until a little bit later in life. And the reason being is that the descension from the angelic realm to the earthly plane is a big drop. And so to experience life in a physical body after being this energy thing, right, up in the angelic realm is a really big, shocking shift for a soul. And so being here on the planet takes a little bit of learning to get your sea legs again, or for the first time. And so you'll find that angelic beings are very, very sensitive. They hear everything really loud. Everything feels really strong. Textures and clothing is hard for them. Doing typical mundane things that are needed to maintain a human physical body is so foreign to them that they often they tend to be a little bit prone to self-care and neglect of self-care, if you will. What, I have to eat every day and I have to sleep every day? Like, what is this, right? Because when you're an energy being, none of those things are necessary. And the other thing, though, is that they do come in and they are incredibly intuitive. They have access to, they're incredibly empathic. So they're not only hearing everything within their own mind and, all the sounds around them, they're hearing everybody else around them. Everybody's emotions are like blaring at them, right? So they're very, very sensitive souls. A lot of them do have this beautiful aura around them, and people are attracted to them like moths to a flame. Somebody's an earth angel because you are just drawn to them. You just want to live in their energy. It feels like stepping into a spa when you're around them. Dogs and babies just come running, right? It's that kind of a soul. And so, there's a lot of things, but the thing that's most specific, and it takes them some time to get there, is this mission that I'm here to do. There's this thing I'm trying to share with people, and this message needs to get out there. And if they can get over all of those human hiccups, right? The circumstances of having to be a person, and, it takes them some time to really get used to that. Then they finally kind of stumble upon, okay, I'm here. There's this message and I need to get it out there ASAP. And then you see them really driven to get that message out there. And usually it's something very transformative, something that's here to change people's lives in a big way and quite immediately.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned star seeds because you have a video about star seeds, aliens, mermaids, and fairies.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about them?
Yeah, I love it. So as I said, there's a typical soul, there's our angelic souls, and then there's star seeds. Starseed also being someone whose previous incarnation was maybe not here on the earthly plane. Your soul may have have existed in a different realm. Now, again, I don't claim to know whether or not we can call these physical realms or not. I tend to believe that if you were a fairy, that's a realm that's it's still within the earthly plane, but maybe vibrating on a different level, and therefore can't necessarily see them with the naked eye unless we're tapped into our intuition, but technically still part of the earthly plane, if you will. So I don't claim for these places to necessarily be other planets or other places. They can be. I just don't have proof. I don't know for sure. I would like to think so, but we don't always know. For me, it's easier to think of them as sort of different levels of vibration, different dimensions, if you will, that our soul can exist on. And I had a medium explain this to me really, really well, is that if we think about, angelic realm being one of the higher or highest up realms, there are many other realms on the way down to hitting the earthly plane, right? And so there are different dimensions that our soul can be coming from. And those different dimensions, they are different places where, they have different roles and they play different roles, energetically speaking, and sometimes they serve humanity, sometimes they have their own thing going on. But you can often tell when somebody has come from one of those specific dimensions, and they come in with very specific missions. And I'll give you an example. I'm sure you've heard of the Arcturian planet. Has that ever?
Yeah, of course.
Something you've heard? Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. So whenever I channel for someone and I know, and they've come from, they're Arcturian right away. First of all, their spirit guide looks like a blue alien, like right away. I'm like, oh, okay. I know where you're from. This is a person who right away, they're really into science and technology. They're really about inventing something. Think of like Elon Musk kind of a brain, right? They're like, it's almost like they're operating on a different level, right? It's not quite human feeling. Right? But they always come in and they're here to elevate us by offering us a new level of understanding, a new invention, a new way of being to help us move ahead a little bit faster. According to these other realms, they tend to think that earthly plane is so archaic. They think that we are like the most Neanderthal, right? And they're always trying to give us information and help us to elevate and kind of evolve a little bit faster because we're so behind. And so, a lot of souls will jump away from those planets or those dimensions, if you will, come and be a human for a couple of lifetimes and share with us some information to help us elevate and evolve just a little bit more.
What's your website so people can find out more about what you're up to?
Yeah, my website is jessicarachel.co. And so, yeah, you can find me there. I offer spiritual guidance sessions, so I'll connect to your spirit guides and I can channel them for you. I also offer private intuitive development coaching. So if you kind of go, I want to not just have you do it for me. I want to learn how to do it myself. I always happy to help you learn how to do that too.
Jessica, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
I would love to share that your intuition is always with you. Your spirit guides are always with you. Don't forget that. You are never alone. And the answers are always within you if you just take the time to get quiet enough to listen to them.
Jessica, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. It's really been a pleasure.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.